there. Oh, the button that I just hit? Yes, thank you for that.
That's fine. Tyler sees things that's behind my back, so that's good.
Yeah.
Talks about a canister. Go ahead, Tyler.
Say, for those of y'all following along at home, the recording started about 5 minutes late. Sorry about that. So, okay.
It lists a couple of other types of respirators, one being a canister type and another a cartridge type, and we'll look at a couple of those that are one that I've got here. Chemical resistance is a term that's referred to. It's the ability to prevent the movement of a pesticide through a material during a period of use. So there are different types of protective equipment that we're going to talk about, and chemical resistance is one of the terms that will define or describe some of this equipment. Concentrates are the actual pesticides that carry a relatively high percentage of an active ingredient. Exposed or exposure is the contacting or touching of a pesticide or getting it on the surface or in or on an organism. Different types of exposure include oral, inhalational, dermal, and ocular. We talked about that last time. A fit check is a term that's used very much like what Carol just outlined there with respect to a respirator. That's something that must be done if you're going to use a respirator or need to use a respirator. It's a on-the-spot test to make sure that the respirator is working correctly and is positioned properly on your face. A fit test is a procedure to evaluate the fit of the respirator on an individual. Formulation talks about the pesticide product as it is sold, usually a mixture of active and inactive ingredients or inert ingredients. Labeling, we go back to the idea of labeling and the label. We talk about that in this section because the label, or the labeling as we refer to it, dictates the amount and type of personal protective equipment that an individual should use for each chemical that you may be applying. And if you have a tank mix, that means 2 or more materials put together in a tank for a single application, you're always required by the label to use the PPE that is the most stringent or protects you from the most extreme material that we're talking about. In other words, if you were to put in a caution, a danger, and then a danger with a skull and crossbones, you've got to use the PPE that is reflected on the label that shows the danger in the skull and crossbones. So common sense, but that's one of the things that we talk about. Pesticide handler or handling, that's a person that works with the process of directly with the pesticides and performing the duties and tasks of mixing and loading, applying, or transporting. And as we talk about pesticide handlers, they are the persons that are the greatest exposure to the chemicals as you're handling it in its concentrated form. So talks about a pre-filter. That's a device that removes the coarse particles from the air in a respirator. A release is a discharge of pesticide from a container or equipment used to apply it. Sometimes a release can be intentional or it can be accidental. An accidental would be a spill or a leak. Residue we've had before, that's the amount of pesticide that remains in the environment. Examples would be on a plant or an animal or on the soil after an application or a spill. Most all of you have seen a tomato or an apple before it's been washed, and you'll see little where droplets of a pesticide that was applied to it had dried, and you'll see a little droplet or track of where the pesticide. That's residue. That's all we're talking about with that. That's just an example of a residue. But that's the gist of a lot of the terms that are listed in this chapter. And what we're talking about is the idea of personal protective equipment. Generally, the minimal amount of PPE that a pesticide label is going to require will be long sleeves, long pants, shoes and socks, and a hat. Usually, that's the minimal amount. Then when you get into more concentrated materials, it's going to require goggles, respirator, coveralls, chemical resistant apron, a wide brimmed hat, chemical resistant gloves, chemical resistant boots. And like we're talking about, the chemical resistance means that the materials will not penetrate those items that you're using to protect you. Sometimes you'll see folks that are applying pesticides wearing cutoff jeans, flip-flops, and a tank top. And generally that's not, I'm going to sneeze, I'm sorry. Excuse me. That's not an acceptable type of clothing to wear with the application of any pesticide. Every label that I've ever seen would require more in the way of protective.
What did you say? A tank top and shorts?
Yeah, flip flops. Yeah, that's just not. But I've seen that done.
Okay, let's go. We'll keep the cockroaches as a beach bomb.
Well, and that's sort of what it would amount to. Yeah, but that's not acceptable. The labels are just more protective than that. A lot of this is just definitions and things of that type, and I'm not going to waste your time or mine either one talking about some of this stuff. It's outlined in the chapter 7 and doesn't require a tremendous amount of explanation. What I've got here in classroom is my bag that's got all my examples of personal protective equipment in it. This is an example of a disposable coverall that is quite often used. It is one called Tyvek, which is very much like the material that you'll see used on the side of new houses. It's a material that will repel water for a period of time. Lightweight. One of these, if you're buying them in any sort of volume, is $3.50 to $4 a piece.
Not bad.
No, but it's lightweight. That whole thing won't weigh 4 or 5 ounces.
It weighs a lot less than I thought it would.
Well, that's why I handed it to you, Tom. You ever had one? You're good? You're just afraid I'm going to dress you up. I know what you're thinking. It's another Tyvek suit.
Cute Halloween costume.
Yeah.
Well, it would be.
Yes.
This is what we call a chemical resistant apron. And if you're a handler, mixing and handling pesticides, this is usually, depends upon the material, required by the label. It's fairly heavy rubber. It's a good idea, particularly if you're exposed to any sort of splashing or liquid material. Mandy, you sure you don't want to dress up for us?
I'm sure.
You're sure? Okay. This is a pair of unlined nitrile gloves, which they always recommend an unlined glove. Why would you prefer an unlined glove over a lined glove?
I don't know the difference between the two.
What's the difference? Slide your hand in that one, that's unlined. It has no lining in it.
Oh, nothing on the interior for anything to stick into and get between the crevices.
Nothing to absorb any chemical.
Oh.
Okay, that's why it's unlined. Now, quite often, if it's weather like it was this morning, I've seen individuals put on a pair of, cotton gloves over their glove and put them in here, just for comfort reasons. But this is one of the things that is recommended by some labels. This is some of the more attractive footwear that you'll ever see. But some labels will require that you wear a protective footwear. These are designed to slip over your boots or shoes or whatever. But and they've got a little bit of a rough nature to the bottom of them to make them facilitate your walking and so forth. These are just the devil to put on. I'm sorry, they just are. They stick.
One size fits all.
Do what, Carol?
One size fits all?
No, they've got different sizes. This happens to be an extra large.
Oh,
But, this one's a big one. This is a part of a kit that I got several years ago, just for this class, just so people would know what some of this stuff is. But I've had folks in here that had absolutely no idea what some of these items were, so it was a little bit of a show and tell. And this is a device that Amanda wanted to wear.
It's not.
It's not that it would fit real well with your hair. But this is a face shield. Goes on with your hat and comes down to prevent splashing. Not rocket science. Sometimes, and this is primarily used by the folks that are mixing your materials together, ready for tank mixes to go in. Rarely is this ever used in the application process. Now, this is a different situation. This is just regular goggles that can be used. Sometimes that's required by a label. And last but not least is the item that Tyler was concerned about. We're going to let him. What?
It says what?
Hi there, Rachel. Maybe Rachel's the one we want to dress up.
Respirator.
This is the respirator. And this is just a simple respirator. It fits over this, and it has the places for cartridges in here. And there is
Fan in it.
a what?
Is that a fan in the
No,
front?
no fan or anything. This is just a simple respirator. But this is designed for organic vapors. And in today's society, in the male population, this respirator will not work well for a lot of folks. What am I speaking of? What's the
Facial hair?
facial hair? So many, the males you'll see with a beard or some sort of facial hair. And this type of respirator does not work well with that because you can't get the fit on it that Carol was referring to earlier. It's got to fit tight to be able to be effective.
That thing looks like it would be a nightmare to wear for an extended period of time.
It is. It is a nightmare. And every respirator that I've ever had any dealings with was a nightmare. That's one of the reasons that today you see the majority of folks that are applying agricultural chemicals using cabbed tractors.
So they don't want to put up with that thing.
So they don't have to deal with this thing. The air filtration system on the majority of the cab tractors are adequate to eliminate the need for this. But we at home have operated apple orchards for on towards 100 years and never had a cab tractor.
So I'm guessing y'all are stuck with the respirators.
Well, Tyler, we try to avoid the use of materials that would require this. I had an old gentleman that worked with us, I may have told you all this earlier.
The dude who hated the respirators.
He would not work, he would quit before he would use a respirator. He'd walk off. He said he'd been working there for so many years and had never had to use one and he wasn't going to start now. And he had probably put on, tons of different types of pesticides and had never had any issue. He said it was much better to stay out of the drift and the material than it was to try to deal with it. And his point was valid. You didn't want to contaminate something and put it on your face. So that was what he was saying. But as we talk about these things, they are components that are listed on the labels of materials. And assume that you are applying a tank mix of several different materials, and one of the materials happens to say that you need to wear a respirator to apply. And one of the state chemical inspectors happens to drive by your farm and witnesses you applying materials. He'll wait till you finish the application of that tank and be sitting in the yard when you come in and want to know what you were applying. And if it's obvious that you've got containers there that contain the material that would require the use of a respirator, and you weren't using a respirator, didn't have it close at hand, you'd be subject to citation and a fine. And some of those fines can get pretty extensive in a hurry. I don't know that I've ever known of that happening, but yet the law and the legal responsibility is there in case that they wanted to enact that on you. Let me look. I think we may have time to look at the video that accompanies this one. I don't think it's too long. I looked at it earlier.
Welcome to Personal Protective Equipment, developed by Dr. Michael Weaver.
Tom, let me know if it doesn't work, okay?
All right. We see it. Oh. It'll come back when you play it.
Professor and Director at Virginia Tech Pesticide Programs.
We
This
lost
lesson is adapted from Applying Pesticides Correctly, Unit 8. Now here's more to discuss personal protective equipment.
Personal protective equipment, or PPE, is clothing and devices that are worn to protect the human body from contact with pesticides or pesticide residues. Personal protective equipment includes such items as coveralls or protective suits, footwear, gloves, aprons, respirators, eyewear, and headgear. Ordinary shirts, pants, shoes, and other regular work clothing usually are not considered personal protective equipment, although the pesticide labeling may require you to wear specific items of work clothing during some activities. Exposure to pesticides can cause harmful effects. To prevent or reduce exposure to pesticides, you need to wear personal protective equipment. You are legally required to follow all personal protective equipment instructions that appear on the label.
Tom and them are not seeing it.
We had it for a second, but then it went away.
He's got on a different type of equipment. That's what I'm trying to do.
Or in labeling. Remember, the lack of any requirement for personal protective equipment or the mention of only one piece of equipment does not rule out the need for more protection. No pesticide labeling instructions can cover all situations. Your common sense, the information on the labeling about precautions for humans, and the tasks you will be performing will help you assess your potential hazard and to select the amount and kind of personal protective equipment you need for each handling job. Pesticide labeling lists the minimum personal protective equipment you must wear while handling the pesticide. Sometimes the label personal protective equipment, or PPE, is clothing and devices that are worn to protect the human body from contact with pesticides or pesticide residues.
This thing's getting aggravated.
Personal protective equipment includes such items as coverall.
I can't tell what we're doing.
Or protective suits, footwear, gloves, aprons, respirators, eyewear, and headgear.
Okay.
Ordinary shirts, pants, shoes, and other regular work clothing usually are not considered personal protective equipment, although the pesticide labeling may require you to wear specific items of work clothing during some activities. Exposure to pesticides can cause harmful effects. To prevent or reduce exposure to pesticides, you need to wear personal protective equipment. You are legally required to follow all personal protective equipment instructions that appear on the label or in labeling.
Tom, you back?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me try to see if I can figure out how to get this in doable. I can't figure, there's a sequence to these buttons and I don't have any idea, and I can't do it without you being there, but I want to see if I can get some folks to help me figure out how to do this without taking so much time. It's kind of getting on my nerves that we can't get it done, and I do it in the same sequence every time, so I don't know.
Yeah. Which you can like try it before you start playing so we can talk back and forth on the microphone. That might speed it up a little bit.
Well, the problem with it is it won't, it doesn't play until I change the cameras over. We can't talk after I get it in a position to do it.
Oh, okay.
And there's a sequence I'm dealing with 15 different buttons. And when we've done it before, I've just kind of lucked onto it.
All right.
But I've got to go from the display to the projector and then from the display to the remote. And I can do it the same way 2 different times, and one time it'll work, one time it won't. So.
All right.
What we'll do, let me just kind of knock off for today. You guys look over this chapter on PPE, and what we'll do is I'll try to get this ironed out, and so we won't spend so much time. It's kind of embarrassing to not be able to do it when we want to do it, but I don't know what else to do.
Okay.
Get some text.
What?
What was that, Carol?
Get that tech support in there.
Yes.
From the school. Get them in.
My problem with it is I'm not sure that I've got, the lady that was competent in the tech support chose to go to another job, and what I've got left to work with right now is really not much more knowledgeable than I am with this. So I got to figure out how to do it.
Oh my.
I'm not really computer savvy, so.
Well, this is more than just computer, because it's got an interface between the video equipment and the computer equipment through this control panel that I've got sitting here, and there's it's real easy to do, if we're just doing it here.